So if you watch my video until the very end, you should be pissed off. Because what I'm going to explain and I'm going to break down is how rogue officers go from one agency to another, get hired, even though their background shows that they have extensive police misconduct throughout their career.
Thin blue light audit. So as a retired deputy chief for the Palm Bay Police Department, a FBI National Academy graduate, 20 years with Palm Bay, 4.5 years in North Carolina, and prior to that, 6 years in the Marine Corps. So I'm a part of a failed leadership system that I'm trying to hold accountable. So as you all know, I've been talking pretty outspoken about some incidents here in Palm Bay in reference to an officer that is terrorizing our community. I've spoke about how on a traffic stop, he breaks a window. So today I'm going to try to break this down little by little. Be patient with me. I'm going to try to do some screen sharing, try to give you some insights, try to bring you some documents. But I've put a lot of effort into this. So if you do me a favor, if you can support me, watch it all the way through, subscribe, share, like, comment. I am reading the comments for feedback, so I do appreciate that. So let me start off first with just a little bit of a video here. Stop. So that's Officer Sean Rollins after the traffic stop, chases Tamara Hatcher to her house. And I've spoken pretty highly on this. But here's some of the pictures that came out. And remember, the Palm Bay Police Department denies that this ever happened. So this is Officer Sean Rollins after she's in handcuffs, has his thumb driven into her neck. But we're not going to talk about this stop today. What I want to focus on today is the hiring and retention of officers. Tumbleweed officers and rogue officers that just go from, they call them gypsy officers. They just go from one jurisdiction to another. That's what I want to focus on. I don't necessarily want to focus on this incident in particular. But this is Officer Rollins jamming his throat in her neck. This is his hand around her throat. Again, if you've seen my previous presentations, Palm Bay Police Department says this never happened. They never choked her. And this is the forearm strike to the face. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. Again, never happened. Palm Bay Police Department, never happened. So, I expressed my concerns with what was going on. And I've gotten nowhere. And I've been trying to get some sort of feedback from anybody to find out if what I'm seeing am I just seeing it wrong? So I'm not for sure. But this is a clapping in the face, right? So he's taunting her. And this is before the strikes and the choking. And people are like, oh, she should have just complied. She's screaming. Yeah, she's screaming because she's been already agitated. She's already been taunted. And I've talked about that officers are trained for these situations. They're trained for these high stress situations. Civilians and citizens are not. We're not trained to have somebody kick in our door, drug out of our house, put in handcuffs, choked, struck in the face. So yeah, she's screaming and she's pregnant. So this week I started seeing social media posts. Now I told you I've been doing a little bit of footwork on the streets, trying to get the message out a little bit. But today I was sent some Facebook messages. So I thought that was a little bit interesting. I was like, huh. So maybe I'm not wrong. Maybe I'm just not wrong. So yesterday, this one popped up. So this is Yvonne Minus. Just a little bit of background on her. She's a former Melbourne councilwoman. That's our neighboring city. She's currently on the Melbourne Police Department's Crime Council Committee. She is a community leader, a community activist, one of the same individuals that Chief Augello, if you remember right, in a previous video says, I break bread with our community leaders. Well, look what she writes. I need someone to please tell me, why is Sean Rollins still on the Palm Bay Police Department as an officer? Are we waiting for him to kill somebody here? This terrible incident with a pregnant woman should have been discussed, addressed, and dissected and torn apart at the Community Relations Council forums on October 9th. How did this get through without any answers? Chief Augello, I need answers, not a cover-up or a smokescreen. All in capital. So there seems to be some sort of sense of urgency from Miss Minus. So, but read what it says, that they had a crime council and this was never brought up. I've been speaking about this since June or July when I first received the videos. This was never brought up in a crime council meeting that Chief Augello was at. He didn't even acknowledge it. So then today I get this. I'm sent this one. This is a congratulatory text message from a gentleman. It appears that he was trying to get some assistance, or his brother was, for a bike that was stolen. And basically says he was there for 10 minutes. Then he left my brother to walk home. Mentions that he's a bad cop, and he wants to thank the Palm Bay Police Department for hiring him. And so I go to some of the comments because I love comments. The second he showed up, I would have requested a different officer. No need to put yourself in danger around him. That's a citizen. This one talks about they don't care when crimes like these happen. They're pathetic. The next one, I'm surprised he's still in the department after his last escapade. Shake my head. Anyone terminated from a previous department should not be able to wear a badge anywhere in this country. So if citizens understand this, why does Chief Augello not? But then let's go to the next one. So these are just going to be some more comments here. Remove this one, add this one. So these are some more comments of the congratulations. Don't leave a bike like that and unattended. Okay, great, thanks. At least he didn't put hands on him. The bar is honestly so low at this point, it's disturbing. Crazy, right? And he's being accused of, and all he's being accused of, and he's still a tool. He probably lost interest because there was no one to throw hands on. That's insane that our citizens recognize that this officer should not be with the Palm Bay Police Department, yet Chief Augello and Chief Spears do not. And then one even, we talked about the policy of intervening, right? The policy, the duty to intervene. So this guy says, if there's even one good cop, there'd be no bad cops. Because Officer Rollins does this with little or no fear that someone will turn him in. So let's look at this one. So here's another social media post and comments by another citizen of Palm Bay. POS told me to shut the F up when I was trying to tell him what really happened. Arrested my daughter and husband the night before their wedding. He didn't want to hear the truth and what really happened. He was on an ego trip. We've talked about officers on ego trips. When you go against their authority, when you question their egos, this is what they do. Thought he was making a good arrest. Arrested 2 innocent people the night before their wedding. Are you kidding me? Didn't even take any of the witness statements. Case got dropped. Very consistent with other cases I've talked about. He has a history of his cases being dropped. When will the courts look at his credibility, the judges? Place this guy on the Brady list. Save the citizens of Palm Bay from more misconduct at the hands of Officer Sean Rollins. Hold this man accountable. Goes on to say, cases dropped, scumbag, lots of money on the wedding and the lawyers. Once again, Rollins' bad arrests don't affect him because Chief Augello will not hold him accountable. But time after time, the citizens are paying the price for Chief Augello's lack of accountability. because Chief Augello's ego is so big that he can't admit that he hired and retains a bad officer. So I've talked about Officer Rollins' hiring. Here's what's interesting. In April 14th of 2023, this is the first time that we hired him. We provided Officer Rollins a $10,000 sign-on bonus. Basically, we rewarded him for his law enforcement experience in the other agencies. And you'll see that down the line, I'm going to talk about what experience he brought to the Palm Bay Police Department and what did he do to the communities that he served. And yet we rewarded him. So when he left in October of 2024, Chief Augello writes a statement basically saying that he's an excellent employee. Officer Rollins has consistently performed as an exceptional employee during his tenure with us. And this isn't true. In training, Officer Rollins was in the middle of an intersection with the supervisor. And when the supervisor asked him, hey, stop letting these cars come through the intersection, Rollins got an attitude, basically said, I'm not a rookie. I'm not a new cop. If you can do this better, then do it yourself. Walks off the intersection, leaving the supervisor standing there. And we discussed it as staff. Is this somebody that we want on our police department? And we discussed terminating him. So this statement by Chief Augello is absolutely not factual. Now, I don't have his training records, but I'll get those. But they're there because everything I talk about is factual. But this, once again, is failed leadership covering up for an officer that terrorized our community. So we basically, this waiver, he still owed $5,000 on his commitment because he left before his 3-year mark. So Chief Augello waived the $5,000, waived the taxpayers' money by writing a false statement to the city manager. Remember, the incident with Tamara Hatcher took place on June 21st. This letter indicates that he was hired June 9th. So 12 days after we rehired Officer Sean Rollins, he's already involved in a controversial use of force where video clearly shows him jamming his thumb into a pregnant handcuffed female's neck, grabbing her by the throat, and striking her across the face 12 days after he's rehired, which is important because he's a probationary officer. When Palm Bay Police Department hires an officer, they're a probationary employee for a year. So all Chief Augello has to do is thank him for his service. Don't admit fault. Don't admit that I'm right. Don't admit that you made a mistake, Chief, and just say your services are no longer needed. But he won't. His ego will not allow it. Ego will not allow it. So first, let's look at how did Officer Sean Rollins get hired 2 times at the Palm Bay Police Department. Let's just look at his applications and see what he wrote. So this is his 2025 application. If we scroll down and we look at his Columbia, South Carolina, and we see reasons for leaving, voluntary resignation. That's what he writes, voluntary resignation. Let's look at Mascotte. Mascotte, he says, resigned. Yeah, right here. Resigned. So then let's look at some of the questions he answered. In particular, these questions that talk about his background. You know, it's kind of a basic question, right? Here we go. Let's say, have you ever been terminated or asked to resign from any employer in your lifetime? Nope. Have you ever been given an opportunity to resign in lieu of termination? Nope. Have you ever resigned while on probation? Nope. Have you ever received customer or citizens complaints? Nope. If previously or currently employed by a law enforcement officer or correctional agency, were you ever subject of an IA? Nope. So then we go down to his 2023. Now let's look at those same questions and we'll look a little bit of how are they answered in 2023 compared to how they were answered in 2025. Well, Violated pursuit policy, traveling too fast, issued verbal warning. That's have you ever received any discipline? 2025, he said no. Have you ever received customer or citizens complaints? Number 35. He responds, I have received general low-level complaints from arrestees as any officer does when engaged in their duties. I have never had a sustained complaint. Now, this is false. This is not factual at all. So the first thing, and we'll look at that, the first thing, this statement in itself is concerning. I've received every complaint that any officer does for doing their job, basically. That's not accurate. I've been in law enforcement since 1999. I have one complaint in 2009. One complaint. It was a complaint for harassing a burglar that I arrested multiple times. Wasn't even investigated. It was unfounded. But he says he receives complaints that basically all officers get for doing their job. That's not accurate. For doing your job well, you don't get complaints. Have you ever been involved in an internal investigation? Use of force, officer involved shooting, justified and cleared. Some missing property complaints. I was not sustained. That was from Mascotte. But yet in 2025, he said no. He answered no. These are the inconsistencies that we should be a little bit concerned about. A little bit concerned. I'll talk about a little bit here. Let me see if I can pull this up. So here's a news article. The media started figuring out that something wasn't right. And it all started when he received a complaint in Mascotte that there was a lawsuit pending in Mascotte that he was served in April. So Officer Sean Rollins became a subject of a federal lawsuit for alleged police brutality in April of 2025. Yet he wasn't hired with the Palm Bay Police Department until June. Yet you don't see anywhere on his applications where he disclosed any of this. Troubling. So let me pull up a recent clip that was shown on local news. And when mainstream media starts playing things about police departments, you know there's a concern, because most of the time they try to stay neutral because they want the inside scoop. They want the good stories. But this is a story that even our mainstream media is a little bit concerned about. But listen to their concerns about his hiring.
Questions about why this police officer was hired to work in Central Florida and what his department knew when they offered him a job twice. As Channel 9's Nick Pampantonis reports tonight, that officer is generating complaints in that community.
Last week, we told you about Officer Sean Rollins and his time in Mascotte that drew a lawsuit from a councilwoman earlier this year. It wasn't Rollins' first lawsuit, and he's not flying under the radar in Palm Bay either.
Where are you heading to?
Back in June, Palm Bay police pulled over a woman for driving an uninsured car belonging to her partner. The officer here indicates he's planning to let the woman go with the ticket before he's stopped.
If she drives away and gets into an accident.
The other officer on scene is Sean Rollins. He gets frustrated as the woman refused to get out of the car. He's told the supervisor is on the way, but he tells the woman she's under arrest and then breaks her window as she's on the phone with 911. Palm Bay police eventually cleared Rollins of wrongdoing.
Do not get out of the car! Why are you attacking me?
This video from when Rollins worked in Mascotte, arresting the husband of a woman pulled over after the husband said something Rollins didn't like. In a simple Google search showing Rollins was fired from the Columbia, South Carolina Police Department after the Charleston Post and Courier found he hit or tased 8 people in 5 months, when the average officer used force less than once per year. He also shot a grocery store worker in the back of the head after the worker didn't comply during a traffic stop, for which Rollins was cleared. And yet, Palm Bay still hired him. Despite the news coverage, his application with the city in 2023 said he had never been fired or asked to resign. He disclosed he received general low-level complaints, as any officer does, but said none of the complaints was ever sustained. We asked Palm Bay if they'd done a Google search before hiring Rollins. The department's response: the Palm Bay Police Department conducts thorough background checks on every member of our organization. This includes speaking with those applicants' previous employers. We have not and will not lower our hiring standards. In the studio, I'm Nick Pampantonis reporting.
Rollins was hired by that department twice. After a short time away, Nick had learned that he was rehired earlier this year. The answers on his second application changed, and he said no one had ever complained about him. His attorney said they deny all the accusations that have been levied against him.
So it's interesting, right? You saw at the end where they put a statement out. They made a poor sergeant do that because the chief Augello can't do it himself. But they said, we will not lower our standards. About what I'm about to show you, it doesn't get any lower because we knew everything. And remember, I was a deputy chief when we hired this guy. When we hired this tyrant, I was a deputy chief. I was never aware of any of his background, but our background investigator was, and we certainly were aware of it on the second time we hired him, which I was already retired by that time. Very disturbing. So there's a couple of different things in this one clip that I want to talk about. First, let me show you the clip about Councilwoman Robin Hughes, so that you kind of better understand, right? Columbia, South Carolina to Mascotte to Florida. To Mascotte, Florida, and then Palm Bay. And I've talked about Palm Bay, Florida in this instance here. But let's look at the Mascotte one. Just disturbing.
Oh my God! Open the door now, or you're gonna get it again.
Wild video here, new at 6. Body cam video at the center of a lawsuit tonight between a Mascotte councilwoman and her own police department.
Yeah, she is claiming, Greg, that her husband's arrest was an illegal use of force. Channel 9's Nick Pampantonis is live in Orlando, and Nick, she's asking for $1 million.
I met her a few hours ago at an attorney's office behind me here. She said it is incredibly hard to watch that night replay.
Okay, I'll go let him know.
This video showing Robin Hughes pulled over for running a stop sign in 2023 before she was elected as a Mascotte councilwoman. Her husband Daniel, following behind her, pulls his own car ahead of her. That's when the conflict begins.
She didn't stop for a stop sign. What's the attitude for?
There's no attitude. I say, okay, all right. What's your attitude for?
I don't have an attitude, man.
Okay, well, I don't have an attitude.
Why don't you go ahead and you need to pull forward, okay?
There's more arguing, with Officer Sean Rollins telling Daniel he'll go to jail unless he moves along.
Open the door.
Daniel refused.
Do not get out of the car. Why are you attacking me?
Finally, Officer Rollins tases Hughes several times and arrests him for resisting arrest.
That my husband was not pulled over. He was not a victim of a traffic stop, and yet I'm in my car and unable to respond to someone who I feel needs my help. And
Hughes, who said that night prompted her to run for her council seat, is now suing the city for $1 million, claiming Rollins' actions were so extreme and excessive that it violated traditional notions of decency. We reached out to Rollins' attorney for comment, but were told he was in the middle of a trial.
I chose to serve this community. I chose to be a part of the change that I would like to see.
All the charges against Daniel Hughes have been dropped. The officer is no longer with the Mascotte Police Department. In Orlando, Nick Pampantonis, Channel 9 Eyewitness News.
So you hear him, no longer with the Mascotte Police Department. Why? Because he was with Palm Bay. And so this is Officer Sean Rollins in Mascotte. The charges against Mr. Hughes have been dropped, which is very common in law enforcement. Officers can do a lot of times whatever they want. And the worst case scenario is that the charges get dropped. Qualified immunity prevents them from being financially liable in these kind of cases. But yet Mr. Hughes has been terminated from his job. Him and his wife both were law enforcement. They both worked for Department of Corrections. Yet he was fired. And his law enforcement certification was suspended, while Officer Sean Rollins' certification isn't even reviewed. So then he's under a lawsuit. He got served in April of 2025, and then he applies and he gets hired by Palm Bay in June of 2025, and never has to disclose that he's currently the subject of a police brutality lawsuit. It's crazy. It's crazy. So let's look at this. So Palm Bay, they deny everything, right? They deny everything. They've denied anything that happened to Tamara Hatcher. Literally says, even though it was on body camera, it never happened. So the media gets a hold of this and they start asking questions. You heard them say, did you guys do a Google search? Did you do anything? And so Palm Bay Police Department This is what they release. This is what they release. Give me 1 second. So they release this letter of resignation. No date. It's from Columbia, South Carolina. There's no date on it. It basically says your resignation from employment effective 17 has been accepted. That's it. February 17th, 2021. So interesting enough, right? We know in law enforcement that officers many, many times, probably a high majority of the time, they get an opportunity to resign instead of to be terminated. So this is what the Palm Bay Police Department releases. This is what they release to the media, his resignation. But here's what I found. Something completely different. So I came across Officer Sean Rollins' training history report from South Carolina South Carolina Criminal Justice Academy. Sean Rollins, see right there. Scroll down, we scroll down, we scroll down. Let's scroll down some more. And voila. Separation due to misconduct. This is dated February 25th of 2021. Reporting Department, Columbia. So we scroll down some more. Again, September 17th, date of separation. Termination, quite contradicting to the resignation letter that you saw. So my guess is maybe Officer Sean Rollins was like, accept my resignation. I won't try to file a lawsuit for unlawful termination, something like that. I have no idea. It's just concerning that his resignation letter was not dated. It had an effective date, but there was no date of when it was written. But this is clearly here. I showed you February 25th. This says date of separation, February 17th. Termination involving misconduct as defined in South Carolina Code Section 2323-150 says the repeated use of excessive force in dealing with the public and or prisoners. Eerily similar to what we've seen. Physical or psychological abuses of members of the public and or prisoners. And it goes in, it talks about some of the allegations, talks about how he pushed down a handcuffed prisoner, grabbed another one by the throat, and how these uses of forces could have been avoided. How would he have just verbally communicated with the individuals, told them they were under arrest, but he relies on physical force to apprehend his I'll say victims. Right here is Chief of Police William Holbrook from Columbia, South Carolina. So that's the paperwork from the Criminal Justice Academy of South Carolina. So then I find my concerns are, did the Palm Bay Police Department know? Did they know? Were they aware? Did I miss something? Did I miss something that where I could have made a difference? Because I was troubled. I was a deputy chief. Why did I hire this guy? Because I was never told of his background. So I do a public records request with the city of Palm Bay. I did this in September, and I received nothing back other than his 2 applications. But then when I saw the media release of his resignation letter, I sent a second request, and I was like, hey, you guys have absolutely released information that I asked for in September to media outlets. I want everything, all his correspondence, I want the hiring correspondence between our background investigators and Columbia Police Department. I quickly learned why they didn't want me to have this. So you'll go through and you'll see all this stuff. There's some performance evaluations, just some interesting stuff. I read one under courage. Let me see if I can find it real quick, which again, I may or may not. Either way, I'll just kind of blurt it out. Here it is, under courage. So Sean Rollins has to do a self-evaluation. If you see right here, I feel that I have displayed on several occasions that I am always willing to, and he puts it in quotations, do what needs to be done, quotation, and will never back down. We know this now. We know that he will do whatever needs to be done. We've seen it. We've seen him strike, choke, handcuffed prisoners. We've seen reports that he's pushed handcuffed prisoners to the ground. He's been in multiple officer-involved shootings. So that statement alone is concerning. So now let's just roll down. I think it's page 32. And remember, this is from the Palm Bay Police Department. This is their information that they gave me. So then we scroll down and we get to his discipline. And there's a couple of use of forces here: justified, exonerated, justified. And this is where it gets a little interesting. So January 11th of 2020, pursuit policy violation, sustained. Counseling and retraining. Talked about discipline. Said he'd never been disciplined. Use of force, January 21st, 2020. Not policy compliant. February 10th, 2020. So what, 20 days later maybe? Use of force, not policy compliant. 12 days after that, use of force on February 22nd. Not policy compliant. We scroll down, May 9th. So now we're looking at 8, Kansas math tells me 17 days. Use of force, not policy compliant. 2 days after that, listen, I'm not making this up. This is the paperwork that our Palm Bay background investigators had when they hired Officer Sean Rollins twice. This is from them. This is my public records request asking for the correspondence between the Palm Bay Police Department and the Columbia Police Department in reference to the hiring and the application process of Officer Sean Rollins. So again, May 6th, use of force not policy compliant. May 8th, 2 days later, use of force not policy compliant. Then less than a month later, use of force not policy compliant. And what you'll see is if you look back, so whoever the investigator is writing justified, 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 justified. But again, they may be justified use of forces, but they're not policy compliant. So there are things that happened that created this use of force that was against policy. And so this is the background investigator trying to hire this guy, literally trying desperately to figure out a way to how to make it look like this is a good officer so we can hire him. Remember, they already corrected his second application in 2025 by putting see initial application. So this is crazy. Another one, May 15th. So March 8th, April 4th, May 15th, use of force, not policy compliant. Another one, June 4th. So you're looking there again, less than a month later, use of force, not policy compliant. I mean, it's crazy. He has another one July 1st, but that one says justified, nothing next to it. And then he has an internal complaint in July 15th of 2020 that's exonerated. Another use of force in October 2028 or 2020, justified. A vehicle accident, not preventable, it says. And then here's where it gets bad. This is where it gets bad. If you're a background investigator, how do you ignore this? So February 3rd of 2021, there was an internal complaint done. An internal complaint. On February 15th, the findings come out. Unsatisfactory performance, sustained. Courtesy, sustained. Abusive process, sustained. Prompt compliance with the direct lawful order of a supervisor. Sustained. Now remember, I spoke about an issue he had in the FTO program where he was insubordinate to a supervisor in the middle of the intersection. This is a pattern of conduct that could have been prevented had our background investigator have done their job. Let's continue because it doesn't stop there. Excessive or unnecessary force. Sustained. Willful violations of policy and procedures endangering persons or property. Sustained. This is all February 15th of 2021. Then it says he resigns February 17th of 2021. So in this time frame, 11 uses of forces. I think I wrote off 8 of them that were non-policy compliant. A total of 19 incidents. And remember, Officer Sean Rollins indicated no sustained use of forces or no sustained complaints. But literally in highlight, all over the place, sustained, 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 not policy compliant, not policy compliant. So what was our background investigators doing? And let me tell you, we sit down as a staff and they bring in their folder and they're supposed to go through this with us. But I never was aware of any of this. The only thing that was discussed was a shooting in Columbia, South Carolina that was justified. That was it. None of this other stuff was ever mentioned. We would never hire somebody like this. And a matter of fact, you heard of the news article. Did you Google this officer? When I was a training lieutenant and that same background investigator was upstairs, we almost hired an officer from Naples that had a history of inappropriate conduct with a minor. And I did a Google search and his name popped up. And I told the background investigator, anytime we are hiring a prior law enforcement officer, do a Google search. If they come up on a Google search, we are not hiring them. So let's take a look if we'd have done a simple Google search, or maybe we did. Maybe we did a Google search. Our background investigators, maybe they did a Google search and clearly just did not care because we certainly had the information in his background, in his hiring packet. So maybe we did a Google search and we just didn't care. But listen to the news articles, the videos that were played.
Well, a Columbia police officer with a controversial past is now off the force. Now, while we are not told the exact reason for his termination, our Brittany Breeding breaks down some events in his career, including an officer-involved shooting and accusations of using non-lethal force during the May protests here in Columbia.
February 17th, the Columbia Police Department fired Officer Sean Rollins. The reason? Unsatisfactory performance after an internal review. No specific details were given. In his nearly 3 years on the force, Rollins has been the topic of some controversy. In August of 2019, this body cam footage shows an incident where Rollins shot Brandon Leggett in the head. Officers say this incident started with a traffic stop where Leggett refused to get out of his car and started driving away with Rollins partially in the car. Leggett filed a lawsuit against Rollins and the Columbia Police Department. We don't know where that lawsuit stands. Rollins was also one of 3 officers who fired non-lethal beanbag shots during the May 2020 protests. Rollins and the 2 other officers were determined not to have broken the use of force policy. This incident prompted a petition calling for Rollins to be fired. That garnered nearly 1,500 signatures. We don't know if either of these incidents are related to Rollins' firing. We've reached out to the attorneys for both Leggett and Rollins, but have not heard back yet. Reporting in Columbia, Brittany Breeding, Watch Fox News, Local First.
So you just saw a report from Columbia, South Carolina, right after Officer Sean Rollins was terminated. They use the word terminated and fired. That's what makes me believe that his letter of resignation was some sort of a plea agreement. Basically, I won't sue you. And they'll say, well, you're never going to work for us. And he was like, okay, I'll just go somewhere else. And he ends up in Florida. He ends up in Mascotte, Florida, and then Palm Bay. So here's a second article. Easy Google search.
Well, a Columbia police officer has been fired after officials say that his use of force rate was much higher compared to the rest of the department. Columbia police have confirmed that Officer Sean Rollins is no longer with the department as of February 17th. We're told that he was fired for, quote, unsatisfactory performance. Reports reveal that the officer struck, forcibly subdued, or used his stun gun on no more than 8 people over an 8-month period. Now, Rollins is also facing a lawsuit in connection with an officer-involved shooting in August of 2019. Rollins shot Sir Brandon Leggett during an argument, or an arrest, I should say, on Broad River Road. Leggett's lawyer says that he was not resisting, and he says the shooting was unnecessary. However, SLED and the Fifth Circuit solicitor found that Rollins acted in accordance with the law. Now, Rollins also caught the public's attention when a video surfaced of him shooting at protesters with beanbags during protests that were held at the State House last summer.
So you see, that article describes a couple of different incidents. Talks about protests. He's literally shooting protesters with beanbags, and even though it was justified, there was videos or reports that one person was on his knees with his hands in the air when he was hit with a beanbag. This is the absolute definition of a tyrant. When we have protesters being attacked by the police. Now, I don't know the full details of, sometimes we hear protests, which are actually riots, but I don't know. I'm just telling you that everywhere this guy goes, there's controversy. And every single time the police departments justify it. It's funny, when we talk about law enforcement, you always say, we don't believe in coincidences. Is it a coincidence that he had issues in Columbia, he had issues in Mascotte, and now he has issues in Palm Bay? Are those coincidences? No. It's a pattern of misconduct. That's what it is. It needs to be treated as such. So let's look at a couple just headlines, right? A simple Google search. You can do it. Google search, Officer Sean Rollins. You can put in Columbia, South Carolina. You can put in Mascotte, Florida. You can put in Palm Bay, Florida. Judge for yourself. Is this somebody you want patrolling your streets? If this guy pulled you over, what would you do? If this guy pulled your wife over, what would you do? Right? Your bootlickers out there, oh, you need to comply. It doesn't matter if you comply or you don't comply with this guy. Either way, you're going to be subject to an arrest, use of force, being placed in jail. Your charges will most likely get dropped. But still, you're going to get fired, humiliated, maybe hospitalized, because we won't hold our officers accountable. Remember, I was a deputy chief. I've been at the table when we justified use of forces. We would look at a video and we literally pinpoint small areas just so we could just touch his vest. Oh, he put his hand behind his back. Just small things that we would do to try to justify these. When officers would fail to de-escalate and actually escalate the situation just so they can use force. This is what I'm trying to show. This is what I'm trying to put out. This is what I'm trying to expose. The failed leadership in the upper echelon in the police departments. I was a deputy chief. I've been there. I know the secrets. So anyway, let's look at some of the headlines. Let's look here. We've got a couple of them. Here's a good one. 8 uses of force in 5 months. Columbia officer fired after 8 force incidents in a 5-month period. Again, if you remember, the news article said most officers averaged 1 a year, 8 in 5 months. The key is not policy compliant. Not policy compliant. Here's another one. Another article, same, almost the same headline. Columbia officer fired after 8 force incidents in 5 months, and goes into describing those. But yet we didn't even acknowledge these. Didn't even acknowledge them. But they're easy. I mean, 2 headlines with the exact, in case you missed one, in case you were the background investigator and you missed one, there are 2. There are 2. Go find them, man. Come on now. You guys are getting paid the big bucks. You sit in a nice, cushy office. You don't have to work the streets. You've been sitting up there for 20 years. You're married to a commander, and you can't even hire a good officer? Come on now. So let's pull up another one. I'll try to tone down my displeasure here for y'all, and I apologize. I've listened and I've watched. I've received phone calls from citizens right here in Palm Bay. They've been terrorized by this guy, a 67-year-old man arrested in a fire lane for a misuse of a temporary tag while he's waiting on another handicapped gentleman coming out of the grocery store. When he asked for a supervisor, he's immediately arrested. So here's another one I just found. Let's push this one up on the screen. Basically from Watch Audits, just describes him being fired, his situation, how he's a rogue cop, basically. But we knew this already. We looked at all the other stuff. We know what he's about. We know what he's done. Then I took some snippets, just some key words, because heck, maybe we don't want to read entire paragraphs, right? Maybe our reading comprehensive level isn't that good. So, benefit of the doubt. Let's just pull up some real quick, just some snippets I took. That way, you really don't have to read them, man. Just take a second and glance. And if these are key words, if you see this kind of stuff, it's probably bad. Less than 2 weeks later, tackled a 55-year-old woman in her living room, bloodying her nose and cutting her face. She had tried entering another room where Rollins said many items were present and were readily available as weapons, he writes. Crazy. 55-year-old woman. 55-year-old woman. Less than 3 months after prosecutors cleared Rollins in the shooting, Rollins used a jaw-like grip to subdue a handcuffed female. She immediately struck her head inside a transport van, which she later said knocked her unconscious. Now, I read a little bit about this one, and it indicated that she literally laid there for 10 minutes, no medical attention, while she's being demoralized by Rollins and some other officers. Knocked unconscious. Crazy. Another female handcuffed. Yeah, what are you going to do? They're a huge threat. When women are handcuffed, they're a huge threat, and we must do anything. What did Rollins say? Anything to get it done, he says. So here's another one. Columbia Police fired Officer Sean Rollins after he used force on suspects at a high rate that was far higher than the rest of the department, including a controversial shooting and another violent incident involving a handcuffed female. How many incidents do we have to find? Isn't one of these incidents alone enough? 8 in 5 months? Not policy compliant? So 1 incident, not enough. 8 incidents, not enough. How many incidents is it enough to not hire this guy? Remember, Mascotte and Palm Bay were both aware of his background. Crazy. So let's see what the chief says. Let's see what the chief of Columbia, South Carolina says when he starts taking heat. When the community has had enough. They're tired of it. They went out and they literally did petitions. They were petitioning to get him fired, Officer Rollins fired. So this is what the chief says. Chief Skip Holbrook now acknowledges some missteps around Rollins' use of force incidents and his concern for them. So now the chief has a concern. He has a concern for the pattern of behavior. See, chief of police don't have a concern when there's 1 incident. We can justify that. Apparently, there's no concern with 2, with 3, with 4, with 5, with 6, or with 7. But after the 8th incident, now Chief Holbrook is concerned. Timmons said in a statement without offering details, more than 180 pages of use of force reports and other internal records obtained by the Post and Courier shed more light. 180 180 pages of use of force. That is insane. That is crazy. How many citizens have to be abused, mistreated? How many civil rights must be violated before a chief of police like Holbrook becomes concerned? How many times before Chief Peterson and Mascotte show some concern? Because remember, Chief Peterson and Mascotte justified that incident that Mascotte is being sued by. And then you have Chief Augello and Chief Spears and this failed command staff that knew everything about Officer Sean Rollins. Hired him once, and then we hired him twice. How many incidents before Chief Augello is too putting out a statement saying, I am concerned? When are we going to stand up? When is the community going to have enough? So now we're starting to see the social media posts come out about Officer Sean Rollins. So the word is spreading. The word is absolutely spreading. Our community leaders are getting involved. They're tired of it. Remember, 7 out of 8 incidents in Columbia, South Carolina reportedly were against Black citizens. Remember, Tamara Hatcher was wearing a Black Lives Matter shirt. Did this trigger Sean Rollins during that traffic stop? The traffic stop that he didn't even initiate? The traffic stop that the other officer was letting Miss Hatcher go? Where she asked for a supervisor? When she was on the phone with 911 before Rollins says, we're going to drag her out of the vehicle. She flees to her house for safety, or she's not safe. He kicks in her door, drags her out of the house, taunts her by clapping in her face, jams his neck or his thumb into her neck, grabs her by the throat, forearm strikes her in the face. Her son, standing in the driveway, 17-year-old son, screaming she's pregnant, in distress. He gets leg swept by officers on scene, pile driven to the ground. They're heard on video. What was he arrested for? Resisting. How old? 17. Sweet. Good for him. Sweet. Those charges were dismissed. Like Daniel Hughes's charges, dismissed. No accountability. No accountability for the officers. No accountability for the failed leadership, the failed hiring, and the failed retention. So what's it going to take? So hopefully I've broke this down just enough that even the bootlickers can't sit here and say that this officer should have been hired and he should currently be working the streets. He has a clear pattern of abuse, misconduct. And he's been protected by Chief Holbrook in Columbia, South Carolina, Chief Peterson in Mascotte Police Department, and now Chief Augello in Palm Bay. Protected by the very leadership that I'm trying to expose, the very corruption that goes to the top. And remember, in the Palm Bay police reports, what I just showed you in the still pictures, they say never happened. If you like this video, it's a little longer, please do subscribe. Please like, please share. Send me emails, give me some criticism. I do have some videos that have been sent to me. I've been asked to try to break down some videos from the perspective of a retired deputy chief. So I look forward to doing that, to giving my insight. I look forward to continuing my fight against corruption, my fight against tyranny, my fight against the police misconduct at the highest levels. I look forward to exposing criminals in uniforms that tarnish the badge, that make life difficult for the good men and women that work in law enforcement. But it starts with the hiring and it starts with the accountability.